The roar of jet engines shook the stadium as the crowd looked up in awe. Everyone was cheering. Everyone except her. Sitting quietly in row 9, unnoticed, she was just another face in the sea of thousands. But then, the unthinkable happened. The F-22 wing commander, the most decorated pilot on the base, locked eyes with her from the cockpit. Moments later, as he landed and stepped out, he did something no one expected. He raised his hand in a sharp salute, directly to her. The crowd fell silent. Who was she? And why did the commander honor her, a supposed nobody, in front of everyone? The airshow was already electric. Engines screamed across the sky as streaks of vapor trailed behind the jets, drawing thunderous applause from the crowd. Families waved flags, kids perched on their parents' shoulders, and cameras flashed with every twist and barrel roll in the sky. It was the kind of day that people looked forward to all year, the raw power of aviation, mixed with the pride of seeing the nation's finest on display. But in row 9, seat 17, a young woman sat quietly, almost invisible. She wasn't cheering. She wasn't pointing her phone to the sky. She wasn't even clapping when the F-22s roared by in formation so close that the windows of the nearby hangar rattled. Her hands rested neatly in her lap, her posture calm, her gaze steady, like she wasn't here to be entertained, but to witness. No one around her noticed. Why would they? To everyone else, she was just another face in the crowd, perhaps a shy spectator or someone dragged along by friends. She wore simple clothes, nothing flashy, and her dark hair was tied back in a way that didn't draw attention. If anything, she blended into the background. And yet, if you looked closely, there was something unusual about her eyes. They weren't darting around in excitement like the others. They were focused, sharp, unwavering. Almost as if she wasn't watching the airshow for the spectacle, but evaluating it. High above, the F-22 Raptors carved through the sky in synchronized precision. The crowd erupted when the wing commander's jet broke formation, cutting across with a deafening roar, pulling into a vertical climb that looked impossible. Cameras flashed. People shouted, "That's the commander!" His jet was the pride of the fleet, and his maneuvers always pushed the crowd to the edge of their seats. The young woman in row 9 did not move, not even a blink. As the commander pulled a high-speed pass right over the stadium, his helmet shifted slightly, as if he was scanning the stands. Then, for just the briefest of moments, his eyes locked onto someone. Row 9. Seat 17. She didn't flinch under his gaze. She didn't wave like others did when they thought the pilots could see them. Instead, her face remained calm, her expression unreadable. And in that split second, before anyone else realized what was happening, the commander knew exactly who she was. The engines roared overhead, but in that tiny pocket of silence inside the commander's mind, he remembered. He remembered her. The crowd had no idea what was about to happen. The commander's F-22 made one final pass, the thunder of its engines rattling through the bleachers. The crowd rose to their feet in a wave of excitement, their eyes fixed on the sleek fighter slicing through the air. But then, something unusual happened. Instead of pulling into another maneuver, the jet began to descend, gracefully, deliberately, circling lower and lower until it lined up with the runway. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, filling the pause. "Ladies and gentlemen, Wing Commander Cole Mitchell bringing it home." Applause thundered through the stands as the F-22 touched down with effortless control, its wheels screeching softly against the tarmac before the jet slowed to a rolling taxi. Everyone expected him to give the standard wave from the cockpit, maybe a crisp gesture toward the VIP stands. That was the tradition. But Commander Mitchell didn't stop there. He guided the jet slowly toward the crowd, closer than usual, so close that the scent of jet fuel mixed with the air. The rumble of the engines shook the aluminum bleachers, causing kids to squeal in delight and parents to grip their phones tighter to capture the moment. Then the canopy hissed open. The crowd went wild. The wing commander was stepping out mid-show, helmet tucked under one arm, his flight suit glinting under the sunlight. He walked with the kind of authority that made people instinctively quiet down. Each step was deliberate, boots striking the tarmac in rhythm with the roar still echoing in the sky. But instead of turning toward the dignitaries in the front row or the senior officers gathered near the announcer's stand, Commander Mitchell's gaze scanned past them, straight into the bleachers. Row 9. His eyes locked onto her, and the crowd, sensing something out of the ordinary, began to murmur. People followed his line of sight, whispering, "Who's he looking at?" Parents nudged their kids to see if they knew. The announcer hesitated, caught off guard, his voice trailing into silence. And then it happened. Commander Mitchell stopped in his tracks, planted his boots firmly on the ground, and lifted his right hand in a perfect, razor-sharp salute. The bleachers went dead silent. Not a salute to the flag. Not a salute to the generals. Not a salute to the nation's leaders watching from the VIP tent. No, this was directed at one single person. The young woman in row 9. Every head in the stands whipped around to her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung in her direction. Mothers asked, "Who is she?" Children whispered, "Why her?" Strangers leaned in closer to study the unassuming figure who hadn't stood, hadn't waved, hadn't done anything to call attention to herself. And yet, here was the most decorated pilot in the squadron, giving her the kind of salute reserved for legends. For the first time, the young woman moved. Slowly, deliberately, she stood from her seat, her back straight, her chin lifted. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply nodded in acknowledgement. Calm, steady, unshaken. The crowd erupted. Phones recorded, rumors ignited, and the announcer, struggling to recover, stammered into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're witnessing something remarkable." But no one knew what it meant. Not yet. All they knew was that the girl who had been nobody just became someone the wing commander himself deemed worthy of the highest respect. And the secret behind that salute was about to unravel. The roar of the crowd didn't fade quickly. It grew louder, feeding on confusion, curiosity, and awe. People were on their feet, craning their necks, pointing phones toward row 9. For years, this airshow had followed the same script. Precision flying, roaring engines, patriotic speeches. But now all anyone could talk about was her. Reporters who had been covering the event turned their cameras toward the bleachers. A ripple of energy surged through the audience as whispers spread like wildfire. "Do you know her? Is she a VIP? No. She's just sitting with regular tickets." Then why the salute? The young woman, still standing, gave no sign of fluster. If anything, the attention rolling over her seemed irrelevant, like waves crashing against an immovable rock. She remained composed, eyes steady, as if she had expected this all along. Commander Mitchell, meanwhile, held his salute for an uncomfortably long moment. Long enough that even the senior officers at the front exchanged puzzled glances. Finally, he lowered his hand, gave her a curt nod, and turned back toward his jet. Without explanation, he climbed into the cockpit, sealed the canopy, and taxied away. The announcer fumbled to recover, praising the display as one for the history books. But his voice was shaky. Some said she was a decorated veteran, though she looked far too young. Others insisted she was a relative of a fallen pilot, and the salute had been a tribute. Still others speculated she was connected to classified missions no one dared to mention aloud. The truth? It was all of those things, and none of them, because the young woman in row 9 wasn't just another spectator. She wasn't even supposed to be there that day. Her connection to the squadron was older, deeper, and written in a history very few people were allowed to know. And as the sun set on the airfield, one thing became clear. The salute wasn't a random gesture of respect. It was a message only she understood. And before long, the world would understand it too. Some said she was a decorated veteran, though she looked far too young. Others insisted she was a relative of a fallen pilot, and the salute had been a tribute. Still others speculated she was connected to classified missions no one dared to mention aloud. The truth? It was all of those things, and none of them, because the young woman in row 9 wasn't just another spectator. She wasn't even supposed to be there that day. Her connection to the squadron was older, deeper, and written in a history very few people were allowed to know. And as the sun set on the airfield, one thing became clear. The salute wasn't a random gesture of respect. It was a message only she understood. And before long, the world would understand it too.